Okay, thanks everybody for coming out. I mean, it's a really early start, so I appreciate you just jumping right in at noon on a Friday. So thanks everybody for cutting school to join us here today. I greatly appreciate it. The underlying theme of the festival this year is they tried to warn us. And I did a version of this festival out in the Bay Area earlier this year that was abbreviated. It was a much smaller festival than what's being presented here. And most all of the films that we showed there are included in this program. But I just wanted to do that because, you know, when we, with the work of the foundation, with everything that all these great venues we partner with, what they do, what TCM does, it's so vitally important to hold the younger audience for these older films because, you know, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. I can tell that you people love your movies and you have a deep appreciation of older films, but it really is a challenge to keep them relevant for a younger audience. And one of the ways that I do that is by putting the films in context and trying to show people that, you know, there were social issues being dealt with back then that are still being dealt with today. And so a lot of the films in this series, like you just saw The Sniper, was like the first film to deal with the idea of, you know, male predators with high-powered rifles, which has sadly become commonplace now. But the film that you are about to see, The Accused, fits into this scheme as well because it's sort of a 1949 version of a Me Too story. And the history of this film is very, very interesting. Producers don't get nearly enough credit in Hollywood histories for their accomplishments, but this is a film by Hal Wallace, who at one point was the production chief at Warner Brothers, who had a huge falling out with Jack Warner over the Best Picture Oscar winner, Casablanca, which Hal Wallace basically produced from the ground up, and then on Oscar night when it won, Jack Warner went up to accept the Oscar and didn't let Hal Wallace get on stage. And that caused a rift that started Hal Wallace on his career as an independent producer, which was a great thing because he was one of the key figures in the development of the film noir movement, because when he went independent, he started producing a lot of movies that we now consider to be noir. The Accused is a story, it's based on a novel called Be Still, My Love by a woman named June Truesdell, who wrote this novel in 1946, and Hal Wallace bought it in galley form with the intention of making it with Barbara Stanwyck, who at this point had become a freelancer in Hollywood and kind of went where the best roles were, and she was not under contract to any one studio. And Hal Wallace rightly thought the world of her because, hey, she's the greatest actress in the history of motion pictures. So, but that's what makes this story interesting, is at one point Barbara Stanwyck was signed to it, and then she read the finished script by another woman, Kenny Frings, and she said, "This movie is too stupid to shoot." And partly that's because she would maybe not have been right for this part. As you'll see, you can discuss this and we'll talk about it in the lobby later, but I would ask people, after you've seen this film, tell me if you would have believed Barbara Stanwyck in the role that Loretta Young plays in this movie. Because Barbara Stanwyck can do anything, but I wonder if she would have been as good in this part as Loretta Young. So Hal Wallace lucked out because he signed Loretta Young to make this movie, and in the meantime she won the Oscar for Best Actress for The Farmer's Daughter, and this was her follow-up film to that, which certainly boosted the film's box office appeal. And she's co-starring with Wendell Corey, who you see here, and Bob Cummings, who were both under contract to Hal Wallace at this point, and were part of his stock company. Wendell Corey was actually a Hal Wallace discovery. What makes this film especially significant to me is the guts that Loretta Young showed playing this part, because she was in her youth in Hollywood. She was a rape victim. She was actually raped by Clark Gable. This is not conjecture. This is now known to be a fact. And she had a daughter that she tried to deny for the longest time was actually Clark Gable's daughter, and she figured it out. And eventually Loretta Young owned up to it. But it's really something to imagine at the time. She was still trying to keep this a secret while she was making this movie. And you'll see why that's such a bizarre thing when you see the story unfold. And she really gives a fantastic performance. Loretta Young is not someone that you think of when you think of film noir, but she is terrific in this movie, and this to me is a prime example of a movie that is often overlooked because so much of the scholarship about film noir has been written by men, and they have a tendency to overlook those films that star Loretta Young or Barbara Stanwyck or Joan Crawford or Ida Lupino. And now, fortunately, the scales have balanced and people understand that there were just as many examples of noir that had female protagonists as had male protagonists. So that's what I always say. Film noir is where the sexes are equal. Equally tempted, equally compromised, and equally guilty. So I will leave you with that thought and now enjoy Hal Wallace's production of The Accused.